You're on a path in the woods, and at the end of that path is a cabin. And in the basement of that cabin is a princess. You're here to slay her. If you don't, it will be the end of the world.
Welcome to the One More Games podcast, where we recommend each other a game each time. I'm joined by my co-host. Yeah, that's the right term.
My co-host, he says in like verbal quotations.
My compadre, my what's Espanol for companion?
What the hell's Espanol?
Spanish?
Oh, I don't know. Amigo?
My amigo.
Yeah. My nakama.
Translator's note, it means friend. Anyways,
yeah.
I'm joined by Alex.
Me, it's I. You can't fucking get rid of me.
This is a podcast where we recommend each other a game to play, and we play it. And it's simple as that. We definitely recommend a game after the podcast to leave a little surprise, but this, you have to start one, so...
Yeah, so a homeless man came up on the street and accosted us, screaming and ranting about something, and we, the very concerned and good-hearted people that we were, went up to him and said, What is it, old man? What do you need?" And to which he stopped suddenly, stared us both deep in the eyes, scratched his beard for a second, and said, "You really should try Slay the Princess. It's a really good game." And so, thus the podcast was born. This one, yeah, we want to play the game. The old man said so, and obviously a wizard, a being such as himself, he holds such immense power. We were swayed instantly, and thus we played the game. And now we're here.
We're here.
We have to carry on his legacy, his old, wrinkly, smelly legacy.
My version of the story is very different. Where I certain someone named Alec, and I don't know who that is. Suggested this. Suggested this one. Yeah, so this
several
is
times.
So this is your recommendation to start things off.
Yeah, it's a nice cozy game where you have to brutally eviscerate a princess.
I'm curious your history with this game, because as I've learned through these past few weeks, you didn't actually play Slay the Princess.
Before. I did. Oh, like before all this?
Yeah, before
No.
this.
I, way back in the day, back in my youth, like 3 years ago, I heard about this little game while wandering the interwebs in search of sustenance in the digital realm, and came across Slay the Princess accidentally when I was in like a visual novel kind of like state, I guess. I don't know. I was super into visual novels for a period of time. I think I saw, was it Markiplier?
Probably Markiplier.
Probably Markiplier. He loves the old visual novel-y doos, and I watched it. I don't remember who, because... Either way, I saw like 3 different endings, and I was like, that's a cool game, and never thought about it again. And then Mr. Brandon Sir here and I were thinking about playing it with another one of our friends, and then, because we did voice acty stuff. Yeah, scheduling came up, became an issue, and we're like, that sucks. And so I was like, hey, like a year later, hey, let's play the game anyway, and we'll make a podcast based on all these games that are like super small that we normally wouldn't have time for, and we'll just shove it into like Arc and Trails and all that junk. And so here we are. We're playing the game.
Here we are. Yeah, I've owned this game for a bit. I can't remember the first time I heard of this game. Probably somewhere on Twitter, something like that. And then just perceivably just forgot about it.
Mm-hmm. And aren't you glad that I reminded you?
Yes.
It's called a psychological horror on Steam. I don't know how true that actually is.
There's roots where it can be.
Yeah, but it's not really ever scary. If anything, it's awesome in like the traditional word.
I mean,
not like awesome is like that's sick, but awesome is like awe-inspiring with certain components of it. Like you have to sit back and like take a breath and go, "What am I? What?"
I mean, there's some stuff that creeped me out pretty bad.
Oh, for sure. My favorite part is when she just slices her neck open and you get to hear every crunch of each bone. That is one of the moments of awesomeness, I think.
I wouldn't describe it as that. That, a little recoiling.
Definitely has to make you stop and just pause for a moment.
I do like
That
they
in
give you an
turn-
option to close your eyes during it.
Did you?
I did on like a later thing.
I
because
like the mental
started
image of like him staring her down, just like mouth open, like what the fuck is she doing?
like a lot of later stuff in this game. I just started like save stating like certain states because due to story reasons, you can only see one of each princess.
One of each attempt at a princess given a certain state.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure you can see like multiple instances of princesses, but
I
they
get-
have
in,
to
like-
end in a way that goes to a new princess.
Yeah, like there might be like different. I don't know if you can get like the witch twice, even if you get like a different one. Like I don't think you can go back to like adversary after you went through adversary and like was it Fury, which was my first playthrough, which was
Speaking of,
fun.
we should probably explain that very briefly. Structure of the game. You are tasked to murder a princess. If you do not, the world shall end, and it's your fault, you disgusting freak. And so you have to go to a cabin in the woods where she's locked in a basement, and she's shackled against her will. A narrator lingering in the back of your mind, along with the voices inside your head, urges you to move forward and kill or save her. And depending on the way that you do it, either you die, she dies. But regardless, you'll come back to life in another chapter. And each chapter has a different kind of princess, which is dependent on the way that the character perceives the situation post-mortem. And so this can lead to certain like titleage. So like the witch is just a state of princess on the second or third chapter, and a chapter is just an instance of death between individual, like god states, I guess, or person states, whatever.
Basically, you have like all these different small choices that will lead into like shaping the perspective of like this said princess, because you'll go through like this route with the princess and then kind of like alter her based off like your actions, and then this all ends into like you go into like a void, and then like this like big hand creature called
The shifting mound.
called the shifting mound will collect these princesses into herself to gain a new perspective.
And that perspective is supposed to be treated like some sort of massive entity, in the sense that the more perspectives that she gathers, the more massive she becomes, the easier it becomes other perspectives that aren't engaging with you to just naturally accrue to where she is anyway.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
This
Kind of the whole point of the game is to accrue perspectives for her.
this game has a lot of choices, or a lot of different routes and like variations, and even like in said variations that it's like I've played a lot of this game. I haven't seen like I've probably seen like 3/4 of what this game has, and I've seen every single
All
princess.
the endings.
I've seen all the endings, which are fine, and all the variations of the princesses. I feel like your first route through this game it's going to be like the special one, of one that like sticks with you the most, because second and third playthroughs are like fine to see like the princess itself, but like in terms of like going through like for different endings, you can like,
Because you have a lot of questions the first time around. And then, like, the questions don't change on each run. The questions are the same, and you've already asked them. So there's nothing to ask anymore. And so the majority of it becomes like, well, what's the next princess? Or what's the next state? Or what's the next scenario? And that's it.
Yeah, because you can just
It loses
save...
its magic.
Yeah, it loses its magic a little bit once you like start like going into it, because like after your first run, you can see like almost all 5 endings except one secret one, which is just
Which
a
is
slight,
the one that I came across first.
which is fun. It's always fun, but we'll get into that till like the end.
Yeah.
The first immediate difference that I like is based off like whether you take the knife or not. You get like 2 different types of princess, which which is not immediately apparent once you boot up the game. It's like, because I first took the blade, and then it's like, she becomes very like snarky and like sassy to me in like a cold way. And then
I didn't. And she was just like, hello? Is somebody there?
Ooh.
Ooh. Do you have his knifes?
Oh, you don't-is? Let me go back to the stairs.
Let me go backy wacky to my shackles.
The Weaver endings are so funny. It's like, I'm gonna abstain myself from this. I feel like there's like no good like leave ending or scenario.
I like the one where she traps you after. So you have to go into a cabin. In the cabin, there's a table. On the table, there's a knife. You can choose to pick up or not pick up the knife.
It's not
and
just
go
a
into the
knife,
basement.
Alex. It's a pristine blade.
It's a pristine blade, which is our implement.
Which is our implement.
Yeah.
AKA like the steel claw
Yeah.
that the hunter likes to say. Also, I don't know how
Yeah, that's
clear
a good
it
thing
was.
to mention.
Don't know how clear it was before. We have like a narrator in our voice, Stanley Parable style, directing our choices, and it's like very like, you have to do this. You have to slay the princess. It's like, why? And you kind of like argue around at the very. You can do that at the very beginning and just kind of like argue around and like really like just rhetoric with the narrator and argue, and you get nowhere.
Yeah, every single time it thinks like you think that you're getting somewhere, he's just like, no, we're just canning this argument. We're not.
Yeah.
We're not continuing with this. I know I'm right, and if you don't know that I'm right, you will soon. So shut up and do what I say.
And then every time after you die, you get a new voice in your head based off of the actions that happen. Like, oh no, we got portrayed. We're paranoid, or the cheated, depending on like how that.
We're in love.
Or smitten, which I
ever.
hate.
If you ever flirt with her, ever, there's a character called the Smitten who will come out of the woodworks like a fucking cockroach. He's great. And then the next chapter will inevitably be based around the Smitten just trying his damnedest to convince all the other voices in the head to just shut up and believe in love. Arguably, he's one of the most powerful.
I think my favorite smitten route is the one where you betray the damsel.
Yeah, my favorite one too. So there's a route where if you don't take the knife going down into the basement and you save the princess instead and you leave, you'll I don't know specifically what happens, but I think
like,
oh yeah, the narrator tries to get you to kill her anyway.
And then you have like
and
three
you resist.
different ways of like branching. It's like slay, resist, slay again, or keep
Yeah.
resisting, and then she'll just like kill you.
Yeah, and she basically takes a knife from you and then apologizes 40 times as she stabs you in the chest. Then you'll come back to life, and this time you've got the Smitten in your head, and the Smitten will like guide you down, and she'll the wiki I think described her as like having bigger breasts and rounder eyes or whatever, and a more like feminine voice. So like your perception has become sexist.
She just becomes a Disney princess.
Yeah. And so you go down and you're like, hey, I'm here to save you. And the Smitten, nonstop 24/7, it's like, oh, we're in love. Isn't this the greatest feeling? And you as the player, you know, we're naturally contrarian. So when you actually guide her out and save her from the basement, one of your options is to stab her in the back. Not only does she apologize on the way down, the Smitten hates you. like so much. Like curses at you. Is like, this is the greatest tragedy, and then forces you to kill yourself. Because both the voices and the narrator have minor control over the scenes of the world, but also you.
Mm-hmm. And then in like the I keep wanting to say subsequent. I can't say it.
Subsequent.
Subsequent chapter. Jeez. Smitten is just incredibly salty and melodramatic at the beginning.
The entire time he's so mad.
That's the one time I enjoyed him. It's just like, this is funny. But most of the time,
And then
he's
the
like,
moment he gets
he's
like a
the-
whiff.
he's like the
just
comic
changes his
relief
mind again.
character in a sense, and not too much of a fan with that. But you know, he's fine. So each time with deaths, new voices, and there's like 7 in all. Pretty good chunk. And you got like all these like differing perspectives, like vying for control in like these circumstances. And you yourself, the player, are essentially another one of these voices in like dialogue options. Because like because there's also like the main hero as like the voice, as like a personification of kind of like neutrality in a sense. Where,
No,
like,
I mean he's the voice of the hero. He's supposed to be
voice
the voice
of the
of the
hero, but
canonical
he acts-
protagonist.
but he acts as like a neutral third party for most of the time, where he doesn't.
I mean, the
commit to
majority
anything.
of what he wants is paranoia, or not paranoia. The majority of what he wants is to save her. Like he just weasels his way around it. Like he just wants like the canonical quote unquote what is best, so you can convince him because he doesn't know what best is. So I wouldn't say he's neutral. I'd just say he is swayable into the
like,
idea of what
yeah.
it means to be good.
Yeah. Which is like, he's not like a substitute, like a stand-in for the player, but he's just like another aspect of like, here's like this like, moldable kind of player character in a sense, but you got like your own thing because the narrator also refers to you, like mainly like you. There's like weird like perspective things where you like it refers to you, but then refers to like hero. Sometimes it's not always consistent, but
In general, he refers to you as you, and then he refers to the other thing as the other things. He doesn't refer to them as you. He only does that when he's trying to refer to the fact that you are being scatterbrained. So say like, oh, that's a stubborn one to the stubborn, but he won't say you are being stubborn. He'll say that one's being stubborn. Don't listen to him. And he does that for everyone. And I love his interactions with the Smitten, and I think the Broken are some of my favorites.
the broken, the cold are pretty good. Where it's just like, I'm unfeeling.
Yeah. He'll be like, the world is going to end. Isn't that terrible? And the Cold is just like, is it? Why?
I do like the cold because, like, in many scenarios, it's like, oh, you guys have finally woken up to like the scenario that we're in. A lot of the times, it's like, it's very funny that the cold is sometimes like the voice of reason.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess in the sense he's supposed to be like pure unadulterating, like rationality, right? Like, when you go and kill the princess, if you're just psychopathic and you're just like, I'm going to slay her, fuck what she says, I'm going to do it with absolute determination. In the first instance you get, you try and kill her. You come back, everybody else is like, oh my god, did we kill her? Like, is it over? The Cold is the only one that's like, yeah, we stabbed her. Like, what do you... What do you mean? Of course we killed her. And then on the way in, it's like, no, she's definitely dead. And then you'll see her dead corpse, and he's just like, yeah, see? She's dead. There's one in which I think Cold shines especially well. So you enter the cabin. At some point you leave. I think you can just, like, not go in there altogether, but you have to leave the basement. And then in the...
Like, she sees you.
Cabin.
She sees you leave the basement because you deliberately like, oh, I'm not going to help. I'm going to leave you, and then I'm going to lock you.
I'm going to lock
there.
you in here and then guard you to make sure that you can't end the world.
And then she gets really mad.
Yeah, and she starts like bashing on the door, and your character is just like, well, this is nonsense, and then you can choose to fall asleep. I don't think it matters how, but at some point you'll fall asleep, and then when you awaken, the door is broken down, and the princess is like a ghost thing, right?
Yeah, like a weird ghost. Like also each princess, like their whole like body changes and like form, and this is like it's like a weird like tall ghost, almost slender man-esque figure.
Yeah, and so she will pop out and scare you and ooga booga, and you have a heart attack, and that's how you die. And you come back, and she's a nightmare. So you go down into like the basement or whatever, and it's just this like weird. I don't even know how to describe. Like
The nightmare
there's
is
no space. Like there's no physical space.
yeah, it's just like floating objects in space until like you get to the ground where it's just kind of like dark and decrepit, and then like the princess comes out as like this horror monster that like anytime you're like near it, like your heart is like almost immediately stops, and like paranoia.
The greatest moment with Paranoia, who's one of the voices in your head, where she scares the shit out of you so much that while you're talking to her, your heart stops, and Paranoia in the back, while you're talking to her from like the rest of the conversation on, will just go heart, lung, livers, blood, heart, lung, livers, blood.
Yeah,
and that's the thing keeping you alive canonically throughout the conversation. At some point, if you make the right dialogue choice, she'll scare you again, and he stops, and then
He starts
the hero
picking
like
up.
urges him to keep going again, and now he speeds up. He's like heart, lung, livers, lungs, heart, lung, livers, lung. It's really good. Or blood. It's
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah, no, it is. That whole scene is terrifying. It's like
It's so good.
it's so just having like the layers of audio, and then like sometimes you can. I love that you can just casually conversate with her. It's like, bro, you're leaving Paranoia and like to dry out here, talking to her. It's so funny.
Yeah. And then you can have like a full blown conversation with her where she's like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna kill you because one, I'm trying desperately not to kill you right now because it really doesn't take much. You're terrified of me, and two, I want to leave because it's the whole point of the princess. She wants to leave the cabin, but she can't unless you let her." And
Well,
for me-
some princesses don't want to leave.
That's true, but it's more so out of like a lack of caring rather than like an urge not to leave. I think every princess isn't against it necessarily. It's just that like some of them are just more concerned about beating the ever living snot out of you.
It's also good to note that like the princess is always like has her one of her wrist chained to the wall and all of that, and then the game does like different unique ways of like chaining her to a wall, and there's always like a secondary chain as well that's almost like intended for the player, which I find interesting.
Except in some scenarios like the nightmare where she doesn't have a chain.
Yeah,
But I think paranoia itself counts as the chain in this case.
damn, paranoia chain you down.
Heart, blood, liver, lungs, heart, blood, liver, lungs. And so at some point I remember dying and not trying to kill her. I dropped the knife, the pristine blade, our implement. It falls into the void. The narrator chides me. And then I don't know if I die. And this is the greatest part about
Oh,
the moment of clarity.
it's
I don't know whether or not you
Man.
die at that moment, or if you ever die, or if you just
you
fail
do die. It's just she sends like a vision of like a potential version of herself at you, and like feeling all that like emotional weight into you until like you die, and that is like
yes, because she's like, I want to show you what it's like to really be me, and she shows you this image of herself as just the normal princess, unable to die, unable to like live a life, unable to meet people, unable to have a career, any success, any attachment, nothing. 80 years of life, die, wake up again, 80 more years of life, die again, nothing earned, nothing gained, nothing. And the only way out, in theory, is you, and you refuse to give it to her. So the only thing she can do is live, find you, get told no, die, live, and repeat the cycle. And it's agony. And you get to see it. It is awful.
And I feel
And
like
then-
that's also a nice encapsulation of like this whole game in a sense, and like that nice little microcosm of like almost like the princess's perspective on stuff, because you rarely get to really see her perspective in this game, like until like the end, where you get like
Partially because she doesn't really have one.
yeah, it's really interesting because there's like two different things with like the evolved shifting mound and like the princess inside of her heart, where it's like that's like the closest you'll get to like under like her like inner thoughts, but like you just see in this instance like this one princess's like inner thoughts that kind of like cycle back through like little themes of the game.
And then after that, I believe it shows you chapter after chapter after chapter after chapter after chapter.
Oh,
of
yeah.
you resisting letting her out. And you snap to 30, 40 plus chapters in, God knows how many.
Yeah.
The narrator begins, and every single voice that's possible to engage with in the game is in your head at the same time, just signifying the sheer volume of times that you have died or failed. And they just chide you. They're like, you've tried everything. You can't resist her. She's too powerful. She's all-encompassing. You have one more choice, and that's it. And it's the cold who kind of guides you. And this is the reason I brought it up. He's kind of the guy that's like, look, you failed. Like, she's all-powerful. You don't have any options now. Which I find just unbelievably lovely. I love the whole shebang. And at the very end, you don't really have a choice. You walk up to a hole in the ground, and inside of it is the princess as this nightmare. And you have no choice but to reach down, grab her by the arm, and pull up. All the choices that otherwise would be there are grayed out with you've already tried this. You can't escape your fate. You've only got one left.
I really love how this game uses I guess like meta elements or like gameplay elements to like really hammer home the thing. Because like it does it a lot where like even the first thing of like the narrator trying to take control, you get like slay the princess, slay the princess, slay the princess, and then one resist, and then like stuff like this where it's like here are like options that you cannot choose or whatnot like that.
To signify that you've already chosen them and they lead to disaster. Like, I like that, yeah. And then, of course, she comes out and it's the end of the world, but then the shifting mound grabs her and you. And like many other times before, you get transported to the long dark.
The long quiet.
The long quiet, sorry. Yeah. And I kind of want to treat this as like a little bit of a moment, because we haven't talked about her yet.
We haven't talked about her yet.
She is kind of super important.
Yeah. I do want to touch on one quick thing of like not being able to choose with like third chapter princesses, because there's a lot
for sure
where there's like where a lot of the third, because most of your runs will end at second chapter, like a good majority of them, and then there's very few third chapters where like it's like full princess. Sometimes it's just kind of like resolving like the arc that was previous ones, and then sometimes you can branch on them.
In 9 times out of 10, it's built by you being a contrarian somehow. Of just like, oh, where the voice says to do this thing, but you know what? Fuck the voice. Let's see where this goes. And then the third chapter is like, well, you fucked the voice. This is what happened.
And it's like, I get it. They don't have that much time or budget to do, like flesh out like all of these. Like the Fury just kills you. That's it. You just make her mad in like certain routes and then just kills you. But there is a DLC coming out by the time we're recording this next month. There's going to be a expanded the Pristine Blade cut. It's coming out in like a month, free update. So there's a few new endings, few new
How the hell does this keep happening to us? First the Trails like remake. And now this.
I saw it, I was like, oh, that's funny timing. This will probably go up around the time that the DLC will come
released.
out. So we're not talking about
That's
any.
not bad marketing.
It's not bad. But yeah, and then after everything, the hands take away Princess, and then you're left with a mirror, which appears in every second chapter. Which,
The narrator can't see.
yeah, the narrator can't see, and then we like ask. And I feel like this is like one time the repetitive storytelling is just too much, where it's like every time you ask about the mirror, it's like the same bit with them because like it's like gonna be like the first time like you're seeing this and it's like, oh, what's happening? But like every time after that it just becomes really like, okay, I just want to skip this dialogue option because it
Yeah.
goes nowhere. Doesn't really like
Every second chapter, the mirror pops up to the side, and you get the option of going, "Hey narrator, you never mentioned the mirror," or "Walk to the mirror and wipe away the grime." And in every single one, the narrator
smash
says
it.
effectively the exact same thing. Or smash it.
yeah.
Is it the stubborn that keeps
Yeah, the
pushing you to
stubborn.
do that?
I think
Yeah, of
stubborn is the
course.
only one that gives you a different option to just, hey, let's smash it.
Let's smash the mirror. And then the third chapter is the only chapter where you will have the mirror directly in your path, and that's every single time, and you can't avoid it. And every single time, the narrator's like, you stand in front of the empty doorway, obviously hallucinating with this mirror that clearly doesn't exist, and then you wipe away it, and he's like, and now look at you, the dumbass, with his hands floating in the air like something's there. At one point, he was like, for me, I think my very first mirror, he was like, you move your hand towards the door to awkwardly feel it. I'm assuming the mirror is there, but you managed to fondle the doorknob anyway. It's like, you're an idiot, but you got it done at least.
And I'd say like the mirror itself doesn't really get like that much of big payoff besides like the like almost like title cards is like, oh, it's you, or it's like, oh, you withered. It's like kind of like almost like an evolution each time of your player character, which
Yeah, so after you actually go to the long quiet, you have a moment with your voices to think things through. And part of that is looking into the mirror one last time. And every single time you look into the mirror, depending on how far you've advanced the shifting mound, you look differently. But it's the same differently for each run, so it's only interesting really for the first run.
yeah,
And it's just like, you've withered, your arms are like, you're just bone, like you've lost flesh, you're seared, that kind of thing.
and I think because a lot of different princesses will mention you as like, ah, little bird, referring to you as like you're like a bird-esque creature, and I learned recently that you're like a corvid, so that's fun. You're like a corvid
Yeah.
bird. Sometimes there's a beak, sometimes there's not. I think the devs left that like up to an interpretation if there was a beak or not.
Well, I mean, like, you only ever see your eyes and like one forearm.
Yeah, so because like some mention a beak, some don't.
Yeah.
So
I
Yeah,
think there's
and
a beak, but I'll explain why later.
yeah, I think there's also a beak there, but yeah, like the mirror reveal is just kind of like that. It's like neat imagery, but like I don't really feel like it has a big enough pay. I guess it's like
It
like
seems to
who
just be
you
like a
are.
mechanical device to show why the voices disappear after each after each run of an entire set of chapters for a given princess. That way you don't have like 15 plus voices every single time you do a single run of the game. Because when you look into the mirror, all the voices
Well,
die? Question mark?
well, your memory's also reset, so it would
Yeah, but
probably
that's not
be
because
the
the
same.
mirror. That's
Like your whole like you yourself like lose all memory of that first thing until you get back to like the mirror starting point.
yeah. The mirror gives you back your memories.
Yeah. But anyways, we're going to finally talk about the Long Quiet, which is a lone kind of like dark hill where the cabin used to be, but instead is the princess of your route, kind of like
Being puppeted.
yeah, being puppeted by like hands, and like all their eyes are being covered by hands, and like
Typically, their heart is being covered as well.
Yeah, and like there's something creepy
Their arms are
of the
limp
way.
and puppeted.
Yeah, it's something. It's really creepy the way that like the hands puppet the hands in a way.
And
Because,
also
like,
the
they're
mouth
very-
gets puppeted. Like
Oh, yeah.
effectively the princess is limp.
And the shifting mound is basically like the abstract. Like
She's
I,
the- She's like the concept of the cycle of life and death.
well, yeah, I mean just more like her vague, like I guess presence of like how she introduces herself,
As like a hive mind kind of deal, or
or just kind of like being like an aspect of the princess, or of like not knowing of who she is at the start.
elaborate. Sorry.
like I think the way that she describes herself as like an abstract concept.
Yeah, she's well at the start she's saying she's empty. So it's
Yeah.
like she's like an empty city with lights that has no people in the houses, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it's like
And
there's
then
a
your
lot of
player character's
space and
like,
vastness
what
to
does that
fulfill.
mean? Stop being. Why are you being so vague? Answer my questions.
And she just responds with like, "Oh, sorry if I'm being vague. I have no idea how to not be vague."
Which is fun.
Yeah. You have to ask her stuff first though in order to get that, which is even better. So you could like ask 2 or 3 questions and be like, "Can you just please?"
Yeah. In a weird way, she becomes sort of an ally in between like these stops. It's almost like you two are like have like this deeper connection evolved from the narrator, which is also an important thing. The narrator always disappears before the mirror scene. So he always like
Before you're transported into the long quiet, because as far as I'm aware, he's not allowed there.
yes, because the narrator's a whole deal. We'll get to him.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm explicitly trying not to mention anything specific about him.
Because I just read all of his questions and I got like a way better understanding of him just like yesterday compared to like the
Yeah.
entire game because the game leaves stuff for interpretation kind of because of like how certain
I mean,
things
it
go.
kind of spells things out for you.
It spells things out, but like if you don't read certain
If you don't pay
stuff-
attention and if you don't dig, you're not going to find anything. But the game does have it in the game. It's not
Yeah, it
like
has
one of
it in
those
the
games where
game.
You have to
It's
hunt
just-
around like FNAF or something, and you have to like, oh well, there's these 3 jigsaw pieces, and one of them's slightly round. That must mean the same round pieces in like the Kentucky Fried Chicken epoch of 1907. It's just like, no.
This game just gives out a
she'll
lot
tell
of-
you.
This game just gives out a lot of information all at once in like these certain like
It really is
lore
drinking from the
depth.
fire hose.
Yeah, there's so much information that comes at you that it's like hard to like
And
digest.
you don't even realize what part is information until like the second or third run, I think. Because your first run, you're like, yeah, this is a lot of abstract nonsense. And your second run, you're like, okay, the abstract nonsense, wait a second. And your third run, it's like, wait a second. And the more and more perspectives that you collect too, they'll spell out different parts of it. So it gets easier to like put the puzzle pieces together. But it's still like, you have to dig a little. You can't just
Yeah.
let it wash over you.
Yeah,
and
like
hope.
your first run, you'll have a vague understanding of what's going on, but like not the best.
It is neat in the sense that I don't think any chapter necessarily spells out the same thing. They'll do similar, but like not the exact same. So the narrator will only give certain bits of information about the player and the shifting mound and himself, like that's split across each individual kind of ending. And the same goes with the voices too, because they also have things to say.
Back to the shifting mound. Do you have anything else to say about her before like the big stuff?
I think everything I want to talk about with her is regarding like the big stuff.
Yeah. Okay, let's go into the big stuff.
Yeah, she's a big lady.
Big lady of
Yeah.
oh, the creature's just ooh.
The creature of nightmares. Should we talk about that hill?
Oh yeah, the hill. On your final
Yeah.
Or well, I guess like I guess one last thing before into the you have to collect 5 princesses for her before she's like satisfied and becoming her new being, and then after that 5 is collected, you go back to the Long Quiet, and then the mountain or like the hill erupts into like white as like a just like
It's like a flood of naked women, but they
Yeah.
don't feel like naked women. They feel like fish. Does that
it's just
or
kind of
like
like
like an
it's like-
actual flood, just like water
yeah, it's like a
from like the tangled limbs and hair and flesh. It just feels like a flowing of humanity or flesh or something. So
Yeah, then you
erupting
got,
is
like,
a
the
very good
main-
word for it.
and then you got the main princess, which does it's like a 3-headed dragon in a sense. With a big
Yeah,
crown.
her tail is composed of infinitely many princesses, which she stands upon in a writhing heap. And she has like princesses draped off of her as though it's clothing. Her hair covers other bits and pieces. And every single time she speaks, it's kind of like a unitary speech. Individuals across the hive mind all chime
Yeah,
in at the same
because
time.
bef-
Yet at the
before-
same time, she can disconnect certain voices to allow them to speak intimately. And in the process, her eyes roll into the back of her head and she speaks almost at the same time as the individual entity, which is bizarre to witness.
Yeah, beforehand it's just like a single like vague echo kind of like effect going on. Then here's like a more like booming like godly presence in a sense. And then
And that's something we should clarify. She is a god.
yes, and so are we, but we'll get to that. And then each princess that you've gone along your run will kind of like show you their perspective in a
Only
way
if you
be-
argue with her.
Yeah, you argue with her because I
I
think
guess
we
we
need to
should
talk
talk
about the
about that, yeah.
narrator.
Yeah.
If we're gonna
well,
get,
we can talk about the whole idea first behind
Yeah.
the purpose of the interaction to begin with.
yeah,
So, without going too much detail, you and the princess are somehow tied by fate in the sense that you were explicitly created for the purpose of destroying her. And in your final moments of discussion with her, there is a mix of longing for wanting to avoid that fate and an acceptance that not effectively slaying the princess will indeed cause the end of the world. And her response is to argue why the end of the world is necessary to elicit meaning in the universe. And she'll do this through the perspectives that you've gathered if you argue with her. Is that a sufficient vague-ish statement? I didn't really need to go into the narrator so much with respect to that.
yeah. This game's a lot at the end. It definitely gave me some like Ava vibes with like the themes they were going for at the end here. Very human instrumentality in a sense, but also almost technically the opposite of human instrumentality. Because like her main goal is for you to become one. Is like what she wants.
Yeah, to unify as like one godly infinitesimal being to be able to properly construct a universe that fits her desire. And technically yours, because it is similar.
Yeah, like her whole thing is like constant like rebirth and like reconstruction defined.
It's the contrast between like there is no good if evil does not exist kind of a notion, right?
Yeah. Where it's like her thing is like because like the player character can be like why did he show this cruelty? Why were you being why do we need this cruelty is a main like sticking point as you can choose as a player. And then yeah, her whole thing is like well, we need it in a sense. or it's like
Without cruelty, you can't contrast it with what is not cruel, and so everything becomes an eminent nothingness. And that inherently composes some notion of meaninglessness, because nothingness is kind of trivial in a sense. So by invoking the notion of cruelty, you ultimately establish the precedent of goodness as in non-cruelty, which I think is quite lovely as a theoretical notion, but also terrible in practice.
yeah.
Yes, we need to torture random citizens so that the other citizens know that they've got it good.
I feel like there's aspects of her perspective that I agree with, but also not.
Yeah, because in a sense, it's like I almost. So we might have to discuss the narrator at some point, I suppose, but I almost agree with her in the case of there is a kind of lost breath of the universe if it has become stagnant, right? If the universe that they exist within, finite or infinite, regardless, has become stale or otherwise needs some sort of event to continue a meaningful existence, I don't think the idea of inviting the notion of death back into an undying universe is inherently a bad thing. Like, imagine all of a sudden on Earth, every single human being had the opportunity to live forever. Would anything ever get done? We'd all just kind of fuck around all the time. Because we have infinite time. We can do it at some point.
Yeah.
Right? Now imagine that same scenario with respect to an entire universe. If nothing dies, why do anything? You can always do it tomorrow. And tomorrow. And tomorrow. And so why do anything? So I agree with that point.
Yeah, but I guess like a construct or a construct, like a counter is like her whole thing is like she wants to like keep like going, almost going through like different realities to finding like stuff. It's what I vaguely got from her.
Just like to explore and to expand her being.
Yeah, to like gain more perspectives.
It does become kind of like there's an essence of her that is definitely obsessive and potentially inherently cruel. Not for the purpose of goodness, but for the purposes of just like a weird fascination with the idea of like existence.
Yeah, it's like she wants to like she's already a being of like great knowledge, but like still wants more knowledge like, in that consumption.
Yeah.
Which can
No,
be
I would
like-
say instead of knowledge, maybe like a wisdom or something.
Yeah, she just wants more.
Basically, yeah. I mean, for God's sakes, one of her biggest ambitions is to escape the long quiet, simply because she feels as though it disrupts her existence by its like almost what's a good way to explain? Like claustrophobic in a way. Like her entire existence and being and conception are too massive for the state that she's in, and so the only way to exactly exist in a way that's even borderline comfortable is to exist with an infinity. Because it's declared that the universe that you reside in after the long quiet is infinite. And then she says, no, I want more. That's more infinity. That's absurd. So she's definitely like, I'd say not quite a swarm, but she definitely fits some aspects of the canonical hive mind. And I mean, that's all I have.
Yeah, I don't really got much on her. I feel like she's like I find her like the hardest to get like a read on.
Purposely,
Of
in a
the
sense,
three
because she doesn't know
characters.
what the hell she is for the longest
Yeah.
time. Because the first princess you talk to her with is like, what are you? And she's like, I am an empty city with the lights on and no one there. And then the second one is like, the city has people now, but they don't know like anything or whatever. The city still has empty houses. And then as you get to the later ones, it's like, there's bickering in my head and I kind of have an idea, but I have no idea. One of the options that you get if you decide to argue with her at some point, the hero will pop back in, even though he's not necessarily supposed to. And he'll guide the player into the basement of kind of like a conceptual cabin, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
And and you go down and you have a conversation with like a subset of her being,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
specifically her heart, which is the kind of like original princess that you meet in your first run.
and depending on the princess you have, you get a different discussion. But if you just
Yeah.
go like the standard one, it's kind of the only way to speak with her rather than like the conception of her.
Yeah, the concept of her.
Yeah, it's like you're not even like speaking to a person when you speak to her, really. You're speaking to an ideology.
But then you get into like the I guess human aspect of a god because you were both gods speaking in like this small conversation, and I love this. This is like the most real conversation in like the entire game. I don't know how to describe it because like the voice actors, oh man, voice actors do
They're
such a great,
so good.
and there's only two of them, and they all have to do like so much like variations in the voice. Like each princess feels unique, which is insane. It's the same person voicing them, and similar to narrator, but I guess lesser so in like some scenarios because you can kind of hear it. But like he's also pretty still good.
Yeah, he's a joy to listen to. And I mean, the whole purpose of the narrator to an extent is like it's the narrator, and then you have all the different ways that you can speak as the hero or whatever the hell you are, you in your you-ness. And to an extent, they're supposed to be the same person, right? And the same mind even. So I'm not totally against it because they're technically different personalities of the same mind, whereas the princess is like an actually different princess each time. So if they're kind of similar, I'm okay with that. But either way, they're a master class act.
I forget like specific conversations, but like in this, you can branch out into three different endings. One is the one that I went with. First off, is kind of like leaving this place with the princess to go off into, I don't know, like the abstractness of like the real world, in a sense, or like
Yeah, the wiki says something like they become mortal and revoke their godhood, but I don't know if I necessarily agree with that.
yeah, it's up to interpretation of like what leaving this place means because like they're both like stuck in this construct, just in this cycle of doing like this act over and over again. This is signifying them leaving that, which is the ending I got, and I got a little teary. Yeah, it's like it's like damn,
Mainly tears, of course. They flexed on the way down.
tears are tears.
Yeah, gritting mustached tears.
And then the one that I find so fascinating, if you you still get like one last choice, because that's with if you don't bring the blade with you. But if you bring the blade, you get two extra options. Where one, she suggests a plan to just keep resetting.
Yeah, she's basically bargaining for her life.
I don't know if she's bargaining for her life in that instance.
She's like, we can just keep going over and over and over again. No one has to die. We can just keep resetting. We'll make the same decision. I know we will every single time because we love each other.
This one I feel like hit me the hardest. I don't. There's just something like after you go through that ending and then you get the first line of dialogue and you get a choice, and it just goes back to the beginning and then like ends. It's just like. Ooh. That's like this is like the true. I feel like this is like the true nihilist path in a sense.
Or repeating forever.
Yeah, the repeating forever. Not willing to like break this cycle. It's like a non-option. It's like a because like the hero or like you yourself is like. What happens if we've already been in this scenario already? What happens if we've already had this conversation? And it's like, this is like just such an existential nightmare that I love a lot. And then we have like, on the face of it, the most I find the most boring ending, where you just kill the princess, and then you become the god of the void. Long quiet. You're both. The long quiet's weird because you're both the long quiet and there's the long quiet.
No. The long quiet is a place. The long dark is what you are.
Are we the long? I thought the
Yeah,
narrator
we're the long
specifically
dark.
said you're the
No,
long
you're
quiet.
right. The long quiet. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah. I was like, remember that. Yeah, no, you're both the long quiet, and this whole place is the long quiet, which makes sense since it's like, well, because the shifting mountain is also the long quiet in a sense because you are the same being.
Yeah, it's basically godly nonsense.
Yeah, but basically,
Or an abstract concept.
yeah, in this ending, you fulfill your mission and then become the god of not death, but like you now control this world.
You break free from the long quiet,
You break.
and you become part of the infinitesimal universe that you were subjugated from, secluded from. And to explain that, we'll have to get into the narrator.
Yeah, and on the face of this, probably my least favorite one, but like I feel
You
like
do get a pissed off smitten for all eternity, which is fun.
oh joy. and now let's just
Go for the
let's
narrator?
pull off the band of the narrator
It's time.
of the and player character.
Should I just go for the narrator, see how much of this I can get?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the narrator is a echo, which is to say that he is a being that doesn't exist technically, who used to be immortal, who witnessed some sort of catastrophe that created some sort of cyclical life and death scenario. In his mortal life, he created a construct called the Long Quiet, which was supposed to be the way of ending the cycle of life and death. In doing so, he then split.
I think it's specifically death that he wants to get rid of. But like,
Yeah, it's suffering and death. But, if you subscribe to the princess's theories, that basically removes life as well. Regardless, he creates the Long Quiet and purposefully messily splits you so that neither of you necessarily feel whole as individuals and long for each other, and also to be able to kill each other. The wiki points out something like yin and yang. It's very similar. Chaos and order in that case, but in this case it is kind of like life and death, but not really.
Also, an interesting side note. He didn't make her a princess. It's just your interpretation of her is a princess.
Yeah, he basically wrapped her in a method that allowed you to conceptualize her, and your conception was that of a princess, and he just rolled with it. And then, in the process of doing this, he created... I don't know if he created it or if it's a byproduct of the godliness, but effectively, if somebody observes the princess in a manner that is relevant to godhood, so as some sort of conception or abstraction, it alters what the princess is relative to that perspective. So the narrator needed to kill himself in the process to become something that wasn't mortal and that couldn't influence the events beyond minimal guidance. And then he split the leftover of his death, which is this echo, into sub-echoes, planting them across a universe constructed by himself that was finite because it was constructed and treated as like a set of separate worlds. And his goal was to make it so that you killed the princess, which is just a god. So then he planted himself in your head, basically. Which explains a lot of his behavior. It's the reason he can't tell you anything directly as the player and why he always has to subside everything. You have to slay the princess. Why? Oh, well, she's going to end the world. Okay, well, how's she going to do that? Well, if I told you, the world would end. Because you'll think that she'll end the world in that way, or you'll believe that it's possible that she ends the world in that way, and therefore the world will end. right? And it also explains the different ways in which she shifts later on between each chapter. The important thing is these mini echoes don't know about each other. They all believe themselves to be the very first echo.
Yeah, which
So
is
every single reality you visit is the first time he's noticed of your existence.
yeah.
He
So
plays
he's
a
not
script.
because like he's always like, oh, this shouldn't happen. This shouldn't be the second time. And it's like it seems like, oh, he has like memories of this, but no, it's just he always thinks he's the first one, which is I like that instead of like the purposely not lying uh narrator is like the narrator with such a certain goal but can't reveal certain information, but like most of the stuff he says is like not false in a way, which I like. Like
It must be
types of,
really
like,
bloody hard to write.
yes, and it can also be very repetitive because this is a very repetitive game.
They kind of get around it though by letting the narrator shut up in moments where he doesn't really need to talk, and letting the voices kind of chat between themselves, and him listening and going, "Oh, this is bad."
Yeah, fortunately that's only like that's with chapter 3, and most of the times you won't get a chapter 3 if you play this game. Most of the times it'll end on the like the first one, so you'll get a very love for like repeating stuff. But I found I thought at first the narrator was a nihilist. I thought like it was like or maybe not nihilist, but like I don't know the best way to describe it because like his whole goal was to like get rid of death
Yeah,
in a sense.
and not even necessarily in a good way, just in general across the entire universe,
and
by
like,
locking you into like a permanent resurrection / fight.
yeah, and because like in most times where you actually slay the princess, you're just in the void. You're in the void and like you're there forever, and then it's just kind of like it's like a blissful he describes it as like a blissful beautiful thing where like nothing happens.
And the voices, because you can kill yourself during that, and the voices will be like, "Why'd you do that? That was awful." And he'll respond with, "No, nothing happening, no catastrophe, no issues, everything just being nothing. That's beautiful. That's everything I've ever wanted." Right?
Yeah.
He's kind of traumatized.
Yeah, no, I at first it's like, he's just kind of like a nihilist. He just doesn't want anything. Or like
I wouldn't
Like
necessarily
he-
call it nihilism.
I guess not
Nihilism
nihilism.
nihilism is like saying I don't really think there's a point in
Or like
having
always
a
assuming
strong
the
sense
worst.
of anything.
He's always like assuming the like.
No,
the
that's not
worst.
nihilism either. Nihilism is like the absence of meaning in something, right? So it's like why be concerned with whether or not you'll die one day, because the fact that it's going to happen is just it'll happen. Like there's no point in putting effort into it. Or it's like why would you worry about whether or not you got rejected because there are bigger issues at hand, that kind of thing. It's like a hardcore stoicism kind of, like a why bother.
Well, anyways, that first initial impression kind of like went away until like he starts describing like his situation, because like the situation outside this reality fascinates me so much, because like he always mentions like the people out there are real, like there's real consequences for your actions, and like the way that he describes this whole thing of like all of his loved ones and like whatnot,
and how he's peeked into the blissful reality that he hopes to construct via your killing of the princess. Like he's seen a slice of it and he thought it beautiful. Like what kind of mad magic nonsense has he done?
Yeah, it's like what type of like reality brings a person to this point? Because at first it's like I feel like he's just kind of like unreasonable and is like, we're gonna get rid of death because it'd just be better. Was my first reading of like the whole conversation with him at the very end because like you learn all this information from asking him questions before going into like the whole like shifting mound reformation or whatever.
And you do get a chance to interrogate him. That's like how you get all this information. At some point, he appears in the mirror, and you have a conversation with him. But the mirror breaks and shatters, and as he speaks to you, every single question you ask, one more piece disappears until he eventually disappears in nothingness. Apparently, according to himself, it was fated that an echo does eventually diminish, and so he kind of knew he was doomed from the get-go, and in fact, he was never really whole. So there's a lot of questions that rises on its own.
Also, he's a bird, or at least like
A corvid, you could say.
Corvid, you could say. Most like yourself.
It's almost like he created you in his image or something.
Yeah.
Which makes me question how the hell the princess happened, but as far as I understand, he doesn't really conceptualize her in the same way you do. So
Yeah.
it might be that your notion composed that and that humans don't normally look like that, which I think is very funny. The idea that, like, beauty and grace for a corvid man is a woman with boobs. A human woman. It's like, man, we get around.
It's also very interesting. Like you get like signs of like, oh, you're not like a human because like of like you just see like
Your hand?
yeah, your hand. Both as like the cursor, but like that's like, oh, this is a cursor, whatever. But then it's like, oh man, you got a weird claw. You got a claw for hand. Look at that.
I speaking of the cursor, this is very quick and kind of off topic, but there is one thing with who is it? The Contrarian, where
I know.
depending on what you do, you can pick up the knife and he'll be like, "Oh, don't hold it by that end. Hold it by the other end. It's so much cooler." And then you do it, and the cursor flips to, instead of like holding it upright, it flips it upside down, like in a stabby kind of thing.
Yeah.
And everybody there is like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, it's pretty cool." So dumb.
This game can be pretty funny at times. It's pretty great.
Throw it out the window. What did you just do? This game's so good. Pick it up if you haven't, please. But yeah, so that's the narrator, effectively.
Yeah. I find he's interesting. Most times during the game, I feel like it's hard to write around all different possibilities and like a lot of players. This like is such a nightmare of a writing exercise. I can imagine.
Yeah, because you have to somehow make it interesting each time around.
And most of the time
And
they
also,
do, which is
yeah,
a feat in itself.
like it's wild on its own. There's a reason this game must have taken so goddamn long to make. I guess at 3 years or something.
It makes sense.
And it's using a visual novel framework, so like the technology already existed.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. All of that was just story and writing and art. And the art isn't like super intense. It's just like storybook art.
Yeah, it's kind of like was it?
Sketchy.
Yeah,
It's
sketchy.
like sketch work.
Yeah, sketchy. Was it? Yeah, it's got some cross stitching in there as well for some stuff.
Comic book-esque.
I wouldn't call it comic book esque.
I would. It kind of reminds me of Bones if you made it black and white. And
Well, I mean, Bones was released in black and white.
all right, well then Bones. It reminds me of like a very stylized comic book. To me.
Yeah, like a yeah, it can be like it's got like that graphic novel kind of like.
Oh, definitely graphic novel. Yeah,
Yeah, it's probably what you're describing there.
yeah. Because comic book nowadays is associated with like superheroes.
Also, like some like the assets. If you move the cursor around, like the assets move around, which is neat.
Yeah, it has that
But-
parallax effect.
But most of the time, I didn't really want to like move around my mouse. Just wanted like the cursor off the screen because I don't know why I just find cursors distracting. Even
I view
if
it as like an extension of my being for some reason. So oftentimes when I'm like talking I like flip the cursor around and like move it back and forth. So it'll be like one very common thing I do with my cursor for some reason is I'll do a figure 8. Just forever. I don't know why. And when you have the parallax effect, it makes the whole world go wibbly. And they do the effect only really justice once, in my opinion.
Yeah, sometimes it can have like a broken effect. Where it's like it's just kind of weird. So it's like I just leave the cursor off and just let the scene play.
Do you have anything else to say regarding the princess or the narrator or the player? Player's kind of straightforward. He doesn't really have as much agency as you'd think.
Yeah, well, the player
there are
is
moments
basically
where he has to like resist the narrator.
Yeah, because there's like almost like 3 versions of well, technically like 8 if you count the voices, but like there's technically like 3 versions of the player. There's like the hero, yourself, and then whatever the actual long quiet internally is. Because there's like the avatar, the voice of the avatar in a sense, and then there's you.
Kind of like the voice of reason in a sense. And then the actual it's like the id, maybe, like the id, the ego, and does that make sense? I don't know, maybe not. Definitely there's at least like that compulsive do something. There's the think about the thing first, and then there's just like the base urge. And especially like the conception is kind of like the highest level of thought. But you don't really like engage with the high level of thought. At the very end, you just kind of mention how good it feels to be it, and that's it. There are lots of fun moments with respect to like the narrator and the player too. Like there are points where the very first thing that you'll notice is when you try and save the princess and you're about to like let her out, the narrator will try and force you to kill her. I think another one with the thorn, which we'll get into later, he shows up and prevents you from doing something, and it's like trivial. He locks the door on you a couple times, so the narrator has some sort of like. Yeah, like he locked the door on me so many fucking times. He'll throw the knife down at you. But he doesn't exist. He's just like creating the events that would allow this to work, I guess. Like there's no other person. So you oftentimes are actually fighting the narrator as well. And it's really amusing too, because you'll get into situations where it's like the narrator speaking of the fact that like you perceive the princess in a way. The narrator will do stuff like, what the hell happened? Why is there 3 of you all thinking these terrible things about her? Look, shut up and do your job, and none of this had happened. Which is very lovely. But yeah, the player as a whole is kind of straightforward. Yeah. He's really just a vessel for you to do stuff in.
The princess herself is a really interesting one. Because
just
like,
as the character, not as the mound.
Yeah, as the character, because I find the mound just kind of like too, I guess, not high level, but just like too much to really care for.
Yeah, there's nothing really to grip onto.
Yeah, because she's literally just a concept of stuff.
Yeah. She's very unshaking in her beliefs. She's not very good at like developing thought.
Because one of the alternate princesses you can get is the Stranger Princess.
Yeah.
Which is, it's very similar to, it's like the most like similar to yourself in a sense of like, oh, this is like almost like the image of like what her godhood would be.
This is like the mortal form.
Because she's got like 3 heads and very akin to like that, and like her whole thing is
you kind of get a representation of how she sees and perceives as well. Because when you visit her, you become so like uncertain that the world shatters, and then shatters again, and then shatters again, and then continues doing so until your reality is so bent out of whack that it just all converges upon the one princess. Kind of like your mind couldn't fathom the reality that it was and kind of superimposed it all together into something that made more sense to it. And then she was born as a result of it. And God, what a mess.
Yeah.
I think it's mentioned numerous times in the wiki, but she does apologize for existing sooner than expected.
Yeah, because you have to go out of your way because on the very first thing you need to like leave immediately and then go for it.
Yeah, and continue leaving until you just get caught by the long quiet. The place, not the person, which is you,
Yeah.
but also not you.
Yeah. Don't really have much else to say about her, but I just like that ending of her just thematically. Of like
I
this
like
is
her when she's in the ending more than I like the princess as the ending and also the shifting mound itself. Because you get a much more rational interpretation of the shifting mound. Because she's willing to actually talk in human terms, kind of. She has to like conflict it somewhat, and she doesn't fully understand the mound because she's only a subset of it. So it's like you get a more rational one because she's not completely influenced, but you still get to like peek into her true heart, so to speak.
instead of like the other princess, which still works well.
Yeah.
And there's
But I
also,
definitely think the stranger is the better one of the two.
yeah, Stranger just feels like the most like complete of the endings.
Yeah, in my opinion, that ending is the true ending when you leave with the stranger.
Yeah. And there is almost one ending that I forgot, and it's if you every second chapter you always leave to not go to the cabin. Not the first one
Yeah.
because of the stranger ending can happen, but like always like second chapter leave, and I was like, by leaving, yeah, whatever. And then it's like, oh, you don't give her any perspectives, and the shifting mound gets mad. All the achievements, because you do it like five times. She goes through the 5 stages of grief, and it's just very like
It's very funny.
it funny and also very desperate in a sense. Like, oh no, I want this. I like this is like the truest way of hurting me.
Yeah, that's kind of sad in a way.
Yeah, it's like the saddest ending because like you just kind of like disappear at the end of it. Like nothing is accomplished there. You both just become the void.
That's not great.
It's not great. I really want to talk about the thorns because I feel like this one's my favorite princesses out of them all, and it's very like I didn't realize it. It's very like short. It's a very short one in comparison to a lot of them, but really like signifies. I feel like the whole themes of this game of like they're like or like represents the journey that these two have gone through in like a human form aspect compared to like the like godly form aspect before. And like there's a lot of like other endings like the Wild also has like similar stuff like that where she almost like comes to like the understanding of the like conflict. I enjoy like those types of endings, but I feel like this is like the most like human version of that because like
It almost feels like two abusive lovers who just like. And to be fair, I want to preface this. Brandon got a different version of this than I did. Mine was inherently more lovey-dovey because I chose to flirt with her in the second chapter.
yeah.
I'm just a notorious flirt in real life. I can't help it. And so my third chapter was almost like a really sad ending to a love story. And Brandon apparently hated it. Which is
it's less. The whole contents are basically the same. It's just more like the kiss scene is more like.
I thought it was cute.
I
How
think
the
it just
narrator
ruins
gets all fussy and then gets really into it.
I don't know. It's just like that comic relief where it's like I enjoy this game's comedy, but I feel like in this
that wasn't comic relief. I feel like that was a sweet moment. The Smitten is a comic relief character, but I feel like
I think it
there needed to be a release of the tension that was constantly being brought up with respect to the whole lovers aspect. The damsel was meant to be played off as a joke. The thorn feels like the correct, like, romantic ending. Because it's we hurt each other, but we come back to each other because we love each other. And conceptually, that makes sense to me. And I quite like it.
Yeah, it's just more like the kiss scene itself just kind of goes on for a bit.
Maybe you're just uncomfortable.
No, I think it just ruins from the pacing of the whole scene. But it is a funny thing out of context of like the narrator being like, I don't want to describe this. Why are you making me describe this? I hate you. I hate you.
and then you do it and he's just like really fucking into it. And at the end they're like, wow, you did a really good job. He's like, yeah, of course it's me.
But
he says explicitly, yes, I'm aware of my talents.
Yeah, but the way that especially how it's voice acted just feels like, oh, this is like almost like feels like this is like the pre-ultimate kind of like princess before like the end. Feels like where they like these two have been like going through all these different routes and whatnot and different cycles, and then this is where it all kind of like leads up, is to like this constant back and forth betrayal and hurting. And I think
it'd be a really thematic ending if after the kiss, like that's when the shifting mound appeared. But then the story would have to be much more linear.
Yeah, also the aesthetic of the whole scene is very, very nice. You got the rose garden outside leading into like a cavern of thorns.
But the thorns are pointing away, so you can get in, but it's hard for you to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just have your choices. The three. And it's all about trust, this whole last bit.
Oh, yeah, trust. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of the whole purpose.
Because, like, the way that I got to her is, like, the witch, which the witch is fun. She's she's quirky.
Mm-hmm. And she shows up as the thorn, too, depending on what you do.
Yeah, because there's many different ways to, like, get to this, but like I gave her like the knife as like a sign of trust, and then she uses that to backstab me, but like before it ends she like feels like remorse for it.
Like, why did you do this? You knew I'd do this. Why would you?
Mm-hmm. It's really hard to describe just like why a thing made me feel a certain way.
Brandon's too manly to discuss his emotions. As a true Chad, he buries them deep and hard.
It's less that I just can't.
I have difficulty verbalizing it. It's all good. I'm just poking fun.
This feels like the princess that you get at the end within her heart, in a sense, where it's like you've both been through like these trials and tribulations. Now you finally reached,
and you have like an actual discussion.
Mm-hmm. Instead of like kind of like,
it's probably the least like skewed discussion as well, beyond sitting with the stranger itself in the cabin. Like you just get a chance to just be like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? And you don't get that chance with all the others because they're all based off of some hyper-realized perspective. If you haven't done it yet, buy the game.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good. I think it's gone up there for me.
It's definitely probably top 10 story games, I think.
I think the like my first run felt really good, and then like I found like some great moments in between them. But I feel like the more as I played this game, like the less.
That said, you did have the moment too where across your very first playthrough, you're like, "This is the greatest ending that you could get. Like, this is awesome. This is.
Oh yeah,
I don't think I could have gotten a better one." And then you played it more, and you're like, "No, that wasn't even like half of the intensity of some of these things."
Yeah, no, because like I thought like, oh man, I got to the mirror. This feels like I like broke out of the bounds of the game in a way.
Yeah.
Like that first moment felt very special, and then every other moment just felt like another routine.
Well, I mean, I guess you eased into it pretty quick.
Well, after the after my first run, that's after how I felt, because I did like technically 4 runs of the game. I did one just like normal one, then I went one where I did not really, I just avoided conflict, and then third one went full conflict. And then the fourth and then my fourth ending was the stranger ending I went for. And then I did the additional one, which is very quick. Of the leave. I think this is
Anything
the best.
else?
I think this is the best choice based game I've ever played. I don't think I can think of another like game with like giving choices that actually like matter.
I don't know if I can think of one either.
Because
most of them just loop back into like 1 or 2 endings just by necessity of game design.
and this game does that too, but like each choice does come around, because like in my ending where it's like oh, the princess in the heart is like, oh, you didn't bring the knife again. Because it's the same person from there, and it's like remembers your like slight deviation of the choice. Others would enjoy that, because most games with choices can kind of feel like,
A statistic.
yeah, like there's not much going for it.
It's like classic choose your own adventure in the sense of like it can't remember the state of the character, so it just has to assume that wherever you currently are is only influenced by wherever you currently are and not by previous state. So it's like, you go to the dungeon and it's like, okay, you're in the dungeon, but it's the same going to the dungeon as if you went to the dungeon earlier on in the book versus later in the book. It's the same go to the dungeon, right? It's the same kind of notion. I think the Jackson book that you can play is the only other one where your choices actually fundamentally matter. And it's literally just a giant choose your own adventure book, but it's freaking massive. Like, it's huge. It doesn't remember state, I don't think, but there's just so much that it doesn't feel like it matters. That makes sense? Just the sheer volume of thing, like choices to make.
Thankfully,
and where they end up going.
Thankfully, Slay the Princess makes it very easy. Like, your main choices are slay, run, or help, or your main like 3 options, and then you get like some variations of that. It's just like a very simple premise, just done effectively, and you get a lot out of it, instead of like, oh my god, these big branching choices like a Mass Effect or something like that.
Yeah, and to be fair, those games always mess it up anyway. I feel like
Yeah.
if your core isn't the story, then there's not any potential for making it truly like an element of the game that's worth
Because then
the
you have
game.
like undercooked segments, and then you have to think of like,
Mm-hmm.
do any of these characters really? I feel like these types of games suffer when you have a lot of characters,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, oh, this one character died, oh, but this
Well,
one
there's
lived,
5 others. Yeah.
or like the choose which one lives types choices is like the
Like Death Game Majority.
uh
Because it's like the next chapter, you have to just pretend either one of them could or could not be there at a given instance, so you can't actually give them anything relevant.
that one less
So they
so.
kind of just persist.
That one I feel like does that decently, but I think it's like when I'm thinking like triple A ga- games, like I know Gears and like Mass Effect have like choose which character lives or dies, and then it becomes a huge major problem for like the next game in that series is like, oh, what choice did you choose?
Yeah. Like, I doubt a Dishonored 3 is ever going to be made, because, like, Dishonored 2, they did, like, Corvo and the fucking other girl. But, you know, that's AA, not AAA. So.
Yeah, yeah, and then their solutions just reboot.
Yeah. Or, like, just choose one of the options for the player. Like, this is the canonical option.
Yeah, for these games to like work, they have to be self-contained.
Or divorced from the previous game somehow.
Yeah,
Like, set in the same universe, but a different area.
not like doing like a true sequel to like a choose your own adventure is both a nightmare and I feel like can be very unsatisfying. I didn't expect to enjoy Slay the Princess as much as I did. It didn't
Yeah.
become like an instant like, oh my god, top 10 game, but I was like, oh man, this is more than I thought it would, because like you always get like those things where it's like with especially like indie games for me where it's like, oh, this is like was a nice experience like with this type of scope. But sometimes like just games like will surprise me and then just take up certain brain spaces in my head for like weeks, and I feel like this game did that for like at least a week.
I
Being
mean,
like,
this is one of those games where you could play and then come away with something for your life.
yeah, because like we didn't even discuss like the Dami Mommy one.
Okay, but she'll keep your head. Okay, that's different though. Like, she'll reside in your head rent free for far too long.
No, that scene. Oh my god, that scene was a lot.
Neil. Yes, mom.
Like, whew. And Razor's also a fun one. Razor has a fun final design that I really like. That's like just a Souls boss.
Yeah, it's a bunch of knives vaguely shaped as a human with a heart in the center. I like the one where
Such
she
a
turns
cool
into a
design.
tree.
Oh yeah,
The one where she turns into a tree is pretty cool.
Yeah,
you have
there's
to like
so-
scrape her flesh from the flesh tree.
there's so many good designs in the game. I think my least favorite princess is probably like the beast, in, like the den.
The damsel.
Oh no, the den, not the damsel.
No, I said my least favorite is the damsel.
Oh,
She's boring. All the other ones are like a kitty cat, or like a fucking creature from your nightmares, or like some weird, like long-necked, three-horned, like creature in the dark, or just a wraith or a ghost or something that's like reminiscent of old English tales. And then you just have, I have bigger boobs. It's like, okay, well.
but I do really like the ending where you keep asking her questions.
And she becomes more and more 2D.
Yeah, it's such a great one. It's like, what do you want? I don't know. What do you want? I don't know, because it just like emphasizes like the like concept of like this idealized version of the
Yeah,
princess.
it's like
in
an
this.
idealized, sexist representation of a woman where it's like she exists just to serve you, in a sense.
And then
So
when you
it's
try
like,
to,
okay, now that we're free, what do you want to do? And she's like, I don't know. What do you want to do? I'll do that. It's like, okay, but like, what I want is what's best for you. And she's like, well, what I want is what's best for you. So I'll just do what you want to do. And it's like, okay, but do you not? Can you function on your own? She's like, I can function with you. Well, that's all that matters. And she just like, like distorts into paper.
yeah,
And then the moment that you snap out of it, she's back to normal.
well, she's not. I mean, if you go full on, she gets taken away, which happened to be. That was a full.
That's the paper?
Yeah, it's a paper. That's an ending. I got that ending first.
I never let it get that far. The moment I see the long quiet come in, I was like, Anyway. And then I stabbed her.
Yeah, this game like explores different relationships just so well.
Yeah, like even from the perspective of like an abuser.
Mm-hmm.
Or even just like a trusting relationship, or one that's a codependent relationship, or like it does do the whole love story, but it also really does the whole like reflection of self kind of deal. Like if you're somebody who's constantly in and out of relationships or is in like really bad situations, you should really play this, because you'll see, yeah, it'll probably be uncomfortable, but at the same time I feel like it'll do something for you.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing her in these scenarios and just having it be spelled out that this is bad, or this is good, or this is fine, or this is not, you know.
And like I do agree with like Shifty Mountains. Like it's nice to like gather more perspectives and like to come to like an understanding to them. Mm-hmm. With them. And yeah. I think it's neat. It's
okay, Marge.
Holding up the potato. It's neat.
I just think it's neat.
But Alex.
Uh-oh.
I got just one more game for you to try out.
Oh? How could I ever have guessed that this was a potential possibility?
What I recommend.
This is when like the title of the podcast like streaks in.
For next time, I recommend you play. But I've been thinking this over my head, and I'm gonna be boring.
Oh my god, the tension's building up.
And I'm gonna be boring. I'm gonna go with my original offer and what was originally supposed to be the first episode of this. I recommend you play Omori for next time.
Okay, Brandon, I will do that. I will play one more game.
Okay, you don't need to force it like that.
Next time, Omori.
ChatGPT.
Oh, should we ChatGPT? Hold on.
Oh, God.
Oh my god.
What do you got?
Oh, yeah, are you ready for this? It's so bad.
Okay, we're about to read a script. Let's see.
This is generated by our very best friend ChatGPT. Jesus Christ. Thanks for tuning in to One More Game. We hope you enjoyed our thoughts on Slay the Princess.
If you liked what you heard, why did I get this one? I hate this. I hate saying this.
Read the line, Bart.
If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. It helps us out a lot.
And don't forget to share your thoughts on the game. What did you love? What didn't work for you? We want to hear from you. I love this last line.
Until next time, just keep gaming and remember, just one more game. Ugh.
It felt dirty to read that.
Instead of reading this, just good night.
Good night.